job description. So a job posting or a job ad is really where you're selling the position. If you put a job description for an HR generalist on Indeed or any of the other job boards, I know what an HR generalist does. You don't need to tell me all the little functions, but what you want to tell me as a prospective candidate is why I want to come work for you. Why this job might be a good fit for me and why your company might be a good fit for me. So think of it as a selling tool. And you also want to make sure that you are talking about the qualifications and skills required, which may not be included in a job description. And then you also, in your job ads, you really want to focus on the company culture, make sure there's contact information, make sure they know where the position is based, especially if you're a multi-state employer. Versus a job description, which really is an internal document. And it's set up to identify those essential job functions and responsibilities. Again, it does go over qualifications and skills that are required, but it also will go a little beyond that, talking about working conditions and physical demands and things of that nature. So it really is, those are two separate items, the job ad or posting versus the job description. Then we move on to performance management. And here we use the job descriptions first and foremost to clearly communicate performance expectations to our employees, monitor their performance based on those expectations, address performance issues as they arise, create a performance improvement plan, or what we love to call as a PIP, to improve those performance issues. And then finally, we use those job descriptions when preparing performance appraisals. So anytime you are looking to evaluate somebody's performance, it's just a great tool to go back to. So you're always making sure you're not comparing an individual to other individuals doing the same job, but you're comparing them to the job description. Then we start the whole process again. That's how job performance management goes. It's very cyclical. So often managers think of performance management as just doing the appraisals, but as you can see from this graphic, it really is an ongoing process. Next, we use job descriptions in training and development, and it helps us to identify training needs, develop a plan for training. Sometimes it's for career planning. So if you have an individual who is in a lower level position and wants to move up, a job description can really help identify those training needs in order to help that person advance. And then we can also use it to create individual development plans or IDPs for those individuals who are, again, looking to move up. And then we also use it for compensation decisions. So when we're developing compensation plans, trying to determine how much we're going to pay people, salary benchmarking, determining merit and market increases, with especially now where so many states like Massachusetts, many states have pay equity laws in place. And when you're looking at pay equity laws and you look at a group of people who are doing essentially maybe the same function. So let's say you're in an accounting firm and you have different levels of accountants. So they may, as far as their job description is concerned, as far as their titles are concerned, may all seem to have the same job. But when there are big pay disparities, what we do find oftentimes is that those pay disparities are usually because an individual is performing tasks or functions that are beyond their original job description. So that means maybe we need to add a new level. So we might have an accountant level number 1 and accountant level number 2, and we need 2 different job descriptions for that. So that's where comp decisions might come into play. And then finally, legal compliance. With job descriptions, it can also help you in determining whether a position is exempt or non-exempt under the Fair Labor Standards Act, or the FLSA, which it can help you avoid discrimination claims under various employment laws, such as Title VII or the ADEA. And it's also good, can be used in determining accommodations under the ADA, which we'll talk a little bit more about. Oh, right there. Anyway, job descriptions. So let's take a moment to talk about the importance of job descriptions when dealing with ADA accommodations. The ADA makes it unlawful to discriminate in employment against a qualified individual with a disability. So the act applies to all employers with 15 plus employees. But even if you have fewer than 15 employees, most states have anti-discrimination laws that may apply. So it's really important to have those job descriptions so that under the ADA, an individual with a disability, so an individual with a disability under the ADA has to be qualified to perform the essential functions of the job, with or without an accommodation. So where do we go to find those essential functions of the job? The job description. So it's important to have those identified, excuse me, in your job description. One site we want to bring your attention to in dealing with reasonable accommodations under the ADA, which can be very, very tricky, is the Job Accommodations Network, or JAN. This is a Department of Labor sponsored resource for guidance on workplace accommodations and disability employment issues. JAN also provides free consulting services for all employers, regardless of size. It's a really, really handy, handy tool, especially again now with in the age of COVID. Where you have employees who have different health issues that might prevent them, say, from coming back into the office, and you're trying to figure out, do you need to accommodate them and what is a reasonable accommodation? JAN is a tremendous resource to tap into. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda to start us building our job description.
Great, thank you, Sheri. Good afternoon, everyone. As Sheri mentioned, job descriptions are important for a lot of different reasons. So let's talk about developing and writing them. When starting a job description, we usually begin with the position title. Especially for online recruiting purposes, it's important to make sure that the position title is clear and concise. You want to try to avoid any internal lingo that only you and your employees can kind of relate to. You want to resist any kind of creative titles, such as accounting ninja or even a happiness advocate. You also want to make sure that there are no gender or age implications in the job title or the job description. And you want to make sure that the title itself is self-explanatory for recruitment purposes. So for example, internally, you may refer to a sales advocate as a brand ambassador, or a customer service representative as a guest advocate. But these titles may not come up in job search engines when you're looking to recruit candidates. Next, we're going to review the steps in writing a job description. These are going to include doing a job analysis, determining core functions, identifying essential duties, and determining the frequency of those duties and functions. It is also important to determine the requirements of the position, such as experience and education, as well as physical, environmental, or special demands of the job, such as travel or even heavy lifting. These are important for many different reasons. For example, fitness for duty if an employee is returning to work from an injury. We'll finish up by writing the position summary. If this is the first time you're creating a job description for an existing position, a job analysis can help determine the core functions and the essential duties of the job. Job analysis might include interviewing and/or observing the individuals who are currently doing that job, or have employees complete activity logs, or even job description questionnaires that will help you determine that information that you're looking for. There are also a lot of online resources available as well, such as the Occupational Outlook Handbook, OOH, or ONET Online, and we'll provide you with these resources at the end of the presentation. Next, we'll need to determine the core functions of the position. This is not a list of all the required tasks, but rather grouping these tasks into 4 to 8 major functions of the job. In general, you want to use 1 to 5 words for each function. When we've identified the core functions, then we wanted to identify and determine the percentage of each function in relation to the total job. So let's take a look at an example of what I mean. Our example job description is for a warehouse supervisor. As you can see, we've lumped all the various tasks of a warehouse supervisor into 4 core functions and listed the percentage of each function in relation to that job. So this position will coordinate and oversee all warehouse logistics, 40%, supervise and direct warehouse staff, 30%, track and account for all incoming and outgoing products, 20%, and maintain safety Maintain standards of safety and security 10% of the time. So we're grouping these from, kind of importance in the higher percentages first. Okay, so next we're going to determine the duties for each of these functions. In identifying the duties, we're going to answer all the questions of kind of what, how, and why in relation to each of these core functions, and also list the duties. We need to identify which duties are essential. And that's what Sheri really talked about. Where do you find those essential duties when referring to the ADA? It's going to be in this job description. So this is definitely important when you're dealing with any kind of accommodation requests. And so to really identify those essential duties are very important. So when we're identifying them, it can be challenging. Things to consider to include is, or to how to build them, is the task necessary to perform the job? Do you have to do that in order to perform this job? How frequently is this performed, or how much time is spent performing that task? Can the task be redesigned or performed in another manner? So, does the employee have to come into the office? Can this position be remote? Is there someone that can take on a part of that function to make an accommodation? And can the tasks be reassigned to another employee? So if it's a lifting requirement, is there someone that can assist with that? If the employee is injured or if there's an accommodation that needs to be made. So going forward, we are going to look at our warehouse supervisor example again. So here are some of the essential duties of this particular job. They supervise forklift and pallet jack operations. They complete accident reports and OSHA logs. They ensure safety equipment is used consistently. They conduct regular safety trainings at weekly meetings as needed. So for each duty, we also need to determine how frequently the task is done. So is it done every day? Is it done once a week or even once a month? And so you just really want to kind of think about that in building the job description and identify that as well. All right, so we've gathered a lot of information so far, but we're going to want to identify the position requirements. And these are things such as skills, knowledge, and abilities, and education and any certifications that are required. These should all be tied directly back to the duties to be performed. So once you kind of wrap it all up, we're going to tie it back. All right, so back to our example. Here are some position requirements that we talked about. We need a minimum of 3 years of hands-on warehouse and logistics supervisor management. So 3 years of that kind of experience. They have to have a valid driver's license. They have to have training in powered industrial truck operation. And they have to have completed the forklift train the trainer and be certified in that. Job descriptions should always include physical, environmental, and/or special demands of the job. Even if it's an office type position, sometimes people have to pick up packages of paper or packages that are delivered that could weigh up to 10 or 15 pounds. Lifting a specific number of pounds that you want to include, standing or sitting for a prolonged period of time. So, if you're talking about your office position or the front desk or the receptionist, primarily their main job is to be sitting for prolonged periods of time. Even, climbing ladders. So if the position requires you to climb a ladder, things of that nature, you really want to include in the physical demands. Then we're going to take a look at environmental demands. So this could include weather conditions. You think of your outside workers that, are landscapers or things like that, that are, they're exposed to high heat conditions or cold weather, any kind of hazardous materials that employees might come in contact with, or even noises. So, sometimes jackhammering or loud noises, you want to note that in there as well. You also want to cover any kind of special demands, such as an overnight shift that the job requires, or even travel away from home, or even on call as part of that position. So here are some of the physical and environmental demands of a warehouse example, of the warehouse supervisor in the example that we're doing. So it requires frequent bending, squatting, stooping, reaching, and carrying of items throughout the workday. You need to have the ability to work in a constant state of alertness for a safety manner. And noise levels can vary at times and can be loud. All right, so we're getting there. We're now moving on to the position summary. So writing this is a brief description of the purpose of the position and an overview of the position's main responsibilities. This summary should be short and to the point, and it should be about 1 to 3 sentences maximum. All right, so back to this example. The warehouse supervisor supervises and coordinates all warehouse teams and functions, including shipping, receiving, order picking, inventory control, inbound QA, and relabeling. So this would be what we would consider a brief description of that specific warehouse supervisor example. So since no job description is all inclusive, we always want to add something that's kind of a catch-all. So saying something like nothing in this job description restricts the right of management to assign or reassign duties and responsibilities to this job at any time, or, you know, other duties as assigned, anything that can really kind of allow the employer to add things as needed or as the job evolves. All right, so finally, the job description should also include lines for signatures. So, you know, if applicable, an HR person to sign off on it, the manager or supervisor, and the employee. And it's a good practice to keep a signed copy of the job description on file for reference. And, you know, we talked about performance management and also any kind of ADA accommodations. This is also something that can be done electronically and stored electronically if that's how your infrastructure works and handles these things. So to allow the employee to electronically acknowledge that they have received and approved their job description. All right, so thank you for sticking with us. I'm now going to pass it right back to Sheri, and we're going to talk about some of the great resources we brought up in addition to the Job Accommodation Network, or AskGN.
Helps if I unmute myself, doesn't it? Thanks, Amanda. Okay, so Amanda mentioned these at the beginning, but ONET Online is a Department of Labor sponsored website which will give you all sorts of resources for detailed job descriptions. It provides detailed job descriptions of the world of work for use by job seekers, workforce development, HR professionals, students, researchers, and more. Excuse me, years ago, when we used to go to this used to be kept at the reference desk, for those of you who remember the reference desk at the library. And then there's also the Occupational Outlook Handbook, or the OOH, and that can help you find career information on duties, education, training, pay, and the outlook for hundreds of occupations. But both of these resources also give you great fodder for building your job descriptions. All right, so let's tackle some of the questions that have come in. So when do we give out a job description? So that's a great question. So when it's always a good practice to give out that job description at an interview, so to make sure that the candidate is aware of all of the functions, because again, ideally we're not putting all of these requirements in our ad, because our job posting is there to try and sell the position, but then we got to get down to the nitty gritty things like working conditions and physical demands and all of that. So you really want to make sure that you give that out at a job interview. And then once somebody accepts a position, it's also a good practice to have them sign off that they've received a copy of their job description, and then keep that in that signed copy in the employee file.
That's great. Thank you, Sheri. I also just got another question in, which is, how do you tie this to performance? And, you know, if you are going to write up an employee, how would you relate that to the job description?
That's a great question. So this is where job descriptions again come in handy. When you're saying to somebody that they are not performing up to par, they're having performance issues, you want to be able to, again, look back at that job description to see or make sure that those responsibilities that you're identifying are highlighted in the job description. And that way you can, that's the best way to hold them accountable. And again, because we've got that signed job description on file.
Yeah, perfect.
Yep.
Now to turn it a little bit to return to work and job descriptions, you know, how would you help an employee in an accommodation, you know, based on the essential functions? So, you know, if their requirement is to come back to work, you know, what could be a reasonable accommodation based on some sort of disability due to the COVID pandemic?
So and this is going to be really tricky, and it's going to get even trickier as time moves on, because we really don't know the long-term effects of for people who have contracted COVID-19. So it's definitely going to be very, very tricky. So what you want to make sure is, again, we've got those essential functions of the job listed on the job description. I call those the non-negotiables. These are things that, I mean, if you're a wait person, you know, waiting tables in a restaurant, you have to be able to stand and walk for a good portion of your day. There's just no way to wait on tables without that, as opposed to somebody, let's say, who works in a retail environment, who all of a sudden can't stand for long periods. You might be able to accommodate them by putting a stool down, you know, for them to be able to sit down to work when they need to. But when it comes to COVID and some of the accommodations, one thing to remember is that it has the ADA only covers employees in their own serious health conditions, not those of family members. So if they're home because they need to work from home because they need to care for somebody, that's a whole different topic. That has nothing to do with the ADA or really with the job description per se. But to make an accommodation, you need to look and see, as you were covering, Amanda, earlier, are there some of those functions that could be reassigned, things that have to be done in the office? So let's say, for example, part of my job might need to be, let's say, filing. And if I'm not able, if I have to work remotely because of health reasons and you're accommodating me, maybe that piece of my job can be farmed out to somebody else who is in the office. And it's a matter of, in the job description, being very clear. I just got done working through with one client recently who had an employee who just had a baby, and they are concerned because right now everybody's working remotely, which is fine. However, they've noticed that every time they have been on meetings with her, the baby is there. You can hear the baby cooing, crying. You know, these are challenges we're all facing right now working remotely. I mean, I'm surprised that my dog isn't snoring up a storm right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. And, you know, to go back to the presentation, Sheri, like to talk about those things that we need to consider when we're developing those essential duties. You know, these are really great tools to ask yourself, is this task necessary to perform the job? You know, how frequently is it performed and how much time is spent performing that task?
But things to include in there, though, Amanda, that we didn't cover in here is that you want to also, especially for people who are possibly remote, when do they need to be available, right? So that your expectation is that they are available via, you know, via phone or email from 9 to 5. You know, if that is when your business is being conducted and it's not possible to work off hours, then you want to be very clear about that. You want to be clear that if it's somebody whose position is going to work remotely, that we identify that they have to be able to set up where they will have limited distractions, because that also is a little bit of an issue when, you know, working from home is just, you know, everything going on, whether you've got construction going on outside your door or your internet cuts out or, you know, all of those things. So you want to be very specific in job descriptions, especially for remote workers, to make sure they understand what is expected of them.
That's a really great point. There is another question in here about how long should the job description be? So I know we talked about adding a lot of things in there, but, you know, what do you think, Sheri? What's a good length for a job description?
Really, you know, the job description, you got to separate out. You don't want to get into the minutia of the task. You want to sort of lump them in. So instead of giving a list for, let's say you have somebody, a controller or an account or somebody in accounting, you don't need to necessarily list all the reports that they need to run every month, but you just need to list something that says they need to run monthly reports. So, I'd say a page 2 at the most, but you really want to, you don't need to get into the actual how they're going to do the job, just the job functions that need to be accomplished, not how they get accomplished. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Another one that came in was when you're doing the job analysis, what are some of the questions that are on, that employee questionnaire that they might fill out about the job duties that they're doing currently?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So on a job analysis, you want to really, whether it's through an interview with a person who's already doing the job, an incumbent, or whether it's a form, a survey that you're going to give them to find out, again, what the specific tasks are that they do, but also what percentage of their day or week is assigned to those tasks. So how frequently that they do them. And then possibly what might be required of them in order to get them done. So whether it's a matter of, if they have to be doing reports, maybe it's a matter of doing data entry. So you want to make sure that you're finding out what's entailed in each of those tasks. So that will help you then also build better criteria for hiring as well.
Perfect.
So yeah, because if it turns out that in order to do this job, somebody has to be proficient in Excel and you're not familiar with this job that they're doing, you need to be aware that Excel is an important tool.
Great. So
one other question I saw come in was in reference to how frequently you should update your job descriptions. And that really should be, well, first off, if the position changes significantly, always want to do that then. But if at minimum you want to look at them annually, just to update and make sure there's been no changes to the position. And again, take a look at whether those some of those job descriptions, if you have people all with the same job description, let's say a daycare facility, and everybody, all the teachers have the same job description, but you may have some teachers who are also responsible for training or maybe developing curriculum or things that other teachers are not, then maybe we need 2 different job descriptions in order to better and more clearly identify what's being done.
Great. Mary just asked a question. If you have a new job role or a new role, is it okay to put in the job description that it's a new role? And also, the job description might change a bit. Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that you need to put in that it's a new role in the job description itself. It might be a good idea to put that in into your job posting, that this is a job, that this is a new role. And because that does, I think to your point, Mary, in the question, it does identify that this might change and morph a little bit because we're not really sure what this role is going to end up being. So that's a really good question. All right. So I think we've come to the end. All right. Well, thank you all for your questions. I'm going to turn it back to Amy to take us home.
Thank you, Sheri and Amanda, for presenting today. What a great program. I love all the questions. Thank you all again for attending the webinar. We hope you came away with some helpful information about the importance of having accurate and updated job descriptions, especially as we navigate through the pandemic. I want to remind everyone that a link to the recording will be sent out later this afternoon. And if you have any further questions, please send them to marketing@mp-hr.com.
Amy, I'm sorry, can I address one other question that just came in?
Oh, sure.
I'm sorry, they sent it in through the chat, so I didn't see it. But it's a really awesome question. So if everybody's still on, so how to reduce fear of coming back into an office, unemployment, working from home. My game changer is a 4-stage air purifier that filters out something I can't even figure out what that is, which can catch anything larger, blah, blah, blah. This is a key factor among other scientific issues. Yeah, so here's the thing is that, in bringing people back to the office, this is, again, a really good time to start looking at your existing job descriptions, making some changes based on any functions that have changed because of this remote environment. And then also identifying for employees who you're looking to come back. We've been having this conversation ourselves because we're talking about us at MP going back into the office. And one of the concerns, of course, is that we also want to know what the company is going to be doing to ensure that, that we're working in a safe environment. So it definitely is a good way, not necessarily in the job description, but in bringing people back to identify for them the efforts that you're taking or making to ensure that it's a good, safe work environment. So thank you for that question. All right, now I'm done, Amy.
Thank you. That was another great question. Again, thank you everyone for attending. Look for that link to the recording and join us again next week for another great webinar. Have a great afternoon, everyone.